Hey everyone, what's going on? So today I want to talk about Brandish Maidens with you guys. Um, so this is a deck that's coming out in Darksavers, and it's been topping a lot in OCG recently, so I decided to check it out myself and see just how good the deck is. The deck has just like a lot of draw power and search power, and just a ton of interruption on your opponent's turn. So really what this deck does is it makes these link ones that search out more back row for you. And the power of this deck is really in the back row. With cards like Shark Cannon, Eagle Booster, and Widow Anchor, the deck is just very hard to really deal with because a lot of the time, all this back row is just preventing your opponent from really being able to play or just like do anything to you. Um, but the only downside to this deck is you have to control no monsters in your main zone, which is why this deck suffers from a lot of the problems that Bullet suffered from, where they needed to keep their monsters on the field, and just losing your monster and getting Kaiju just hurt Bullets as much as it hurts this deck here. Um, but this deck doesn't get hurt as much as Bullets does, so it's not really a vice versa thing, because if you lose like to like a Raigeki or something, you still control no main monster, so you can still play out your back row, which is just really helpful. Unlike with Bullets, where once they lose their monsters, basically their whole play gets shut down. So the reason I'm comparing the two is because like both decks just play like really good back row cards that they can just flip out of nowhere, and just helps both decks play so well. I think a problem that this deck really suffers from is another thing that Bolt suffer from, where if you're up against a monster that just like can't be affected by your back row or you can't target it or something, it's very difficult for this deck to deal with and just takes a lot of resources for you to be able to get over these problems. You really have to put a lot of resources into getting over random stuff like Obelisk or Chaos Giant. Not that you'll see those in like an actual competitive environment, but it's just things like those that just has a lot of trouble dealing with, while it can just single-handedly destroy like the most competitive decks of the format. As you see here, it struggled a lot getting over the Chaos Giant, but in this next replay that you're about to see, you can just see how it just absolutely annihilates a highly competitive deck. So for this replay, it's going to be a lot of it doing the same stuff, except I'm just going to try and walk through what's going on for you guys, and then we're going to talk about what this deck profile looks like. This deck doesn't have like a real turn preference. Like going first is of course the best, but if you're still going second, you don't just like automatically lose to your opponent making a decent board. Which is really cool. I think this deck has a lot of ways to like deal with what's going on. So that continuous spell is really good. And it's like a spellbook of judgment essentially. And the reason for Foolish Burial Goods is all of these quick play spells, they get a second effect that's also really powerful, just as much as the first effect, if you have 3 or more spells in your graveyard. So that's really helpful for this deck to get stronger plays out. Personally, I think this is one of the best cards in the whole deck, Brandish Startup Engage. You basically Rhoda out any card in your any of your Brandish cards out of your deck. And then if you have 3 spell cards or more in your grave, you get to draw an extra card, which we got Desires, or you can like draw into a hand trap or another quick play spell. It's just really powerful and just does so much. This is a really good setup right here, because the field spell, what it does is you target one card that you control, and then you get to basically duality your next 3 cards and take a Brandish card from it. And as long as you excavate a Brandish card, that card that you targeted with the first effect will get sent to the grave. But what you can do here with Brandish Maiden Rye is tribute it for one of your link 1s. So you get your field spell effect, and you get a link 1 out immediately. And the same works for your quick play spells that you had set. You can target them and then activate them, so that way you get their effect and you get the field spell effect. And that's really what just makes this deck really powerful, is just how easily it is to get so many effects to going off, and just you take your opponent's board and you just kill them with it. It's just really crazy. This is another monster worth talking about. Topologic Trisbayana. I've heard it pronounced different ways, but I think it's pronounced Trisbayana. It just banishes all spells and traps when it hits the board. So it's just definitely a card to look out for in the future. And after that, you get to set up your back row if you have any left. Hand traps. Like, this deck is definitely difficult to deal with because it just goes off really hard, and it's really hard to prevent it from doing things like this. But that's my experience playing the deck so far. I'm gonna give you guys a deck list, and let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. But while you're making a comment, check out the description. You can find the rest of the Gyro Gaming social media, like the Facebook page, the Discord, the Patreon, and all that cool stuff. Make sure to give that stuff a look. Alright, so for the deck list, we have 3 Brandish, Maiden, Rye. This is a very important card because it's going to get your Link 1s on the board, and it's a quick effect too, so like if your opponent tries to like Torrential Tribute or Raigeki or do something to you, you can still tribute it if you want to, and they can't really do anything about it after that. And then, so long as a Brandish, Maiden, Link monster gets destroyed or leaves the field because of your opponent, you can special summon this back once per turn, so that's also pretty helpful. For hand traps, we're playing 2 Ghost Ogre and 3 Ash Blossom. We're playing 1 Rhoda because it's going to get Rye, 2 Desires because just about everything in this deck is a 3 of, so Desires isn't a big loss on your combo pieces because you're just drawing in so much anyway. 1 Foolish Burial Goods, this just helps get to that 3 spells in graveyard. Someone mentioned playing a Bamboo Sword engine, but this deck doesn't really have the space to do that. Of course, you can probably just take out like hand traps or something, or like the Cyclones if you want, but I think this works perfectly fine the way it is. Next is 3 Terraforming. That's because this field spell that this deck has just really good. It's a duality for Brandish or like Dark Magic Circle. I think it's more comparable to Dark Magic Circle. Then there's 3 Brandish Startup Engage. This card is just so insane. You can, like I mentioned before, you can Rhoda out any Brandish card in your whole deck, and then if you have 3 spells in your grave, you get to draw an extra card. So playing this card can be a +1 once you have 3 spells in your graveyard. 3 Magical Cyclone just to deal with some extra back row. It's also just like 3 extra blank spaces, so if you want to put something else there, you can. But I think back row removal is just very important for this deck. Next is 3 Brandish Mecha Hornet Bit. This is basically 3 more Brandish, Maiden, Rye, because it just gives you a token with Brandish in the card names. That means you can tribute it off or link it away for one of your Brandish Maidens. 3 Brandish Mecha Widow Anchor. This is possibly the best quick play spell in the whole deck. It's 1 an Effect Veiler, and then it's a Mind Control, or like a Change of Heart more comparably. The only difference here is the 1 is a quick play spell, so you can Change of Heart on your opponent's turn. And 2, when you take control of that monster, its effects are going to be negated because of that first effect. But it's definitely worth a monster getting its effects negated, and then your opponent will lose that monster, so like they won't be able to like link it away or anything. Next is Brandish Mecha Eagle Booster. This card has the best first effect, I think, because it just makes your monster unaffected by card effects for that whole turn, which is just really insane. So like if your opponent wastes their Raigeki or does something foolish, you can just punish them super hard for it with Eagle Booster. And on top of that, once you have 3 spells in your grave, you're just unaffected. You just can't be destroyed by battle also. So it's just a really safe card to use, and it's just definitely difficult for your opponent to deal with once you have the 3 spells in your grave. Next is going to be 3 Brandish Mecha Shark Cannon. Out of the three, this card is interesting. I think it has the best second effect, probably, or second best to Widow Anchor. Um, so for the first part, you can banish a card from your opponent's graveyard. From my experience so far, this has helped me deal with like Fairy Tale Snow, or just like any decks that are very graveyard centric and just need to go through their grave a lot. But also on top of that, the card that you target with this effect, when you have the three spells, you can reborn it to your side of the field, which is pretty useful for just stealing their stuff and then going into a link combo if you want. Then 3 Brandish Mechanism multi-roll. This card is like, it's like Spellbook of Judgment, but from your graveyard. For every like Brandish spell that you use in that turn, you can set a Brandish spell from your graveyard during your end phase, so you can set up for your opponent's turn. Or if you use them in your opponent's turn, you can set up for your turn. It's just a really good card. As long as you just like use three Brandish spells, you can probably pass with a full back row. And then finally, it's going to be a Brandish Airspace Air 0. 3 of this, the field spell. Like I mentioned before, it's comparable to Dark Magic Circle, and it also has like a Cosmo Town effect where if it goes from your field to your grave, you get to special summon a Brandish Maiden from your deck. That's not as good as it would be in Cosmo because you don't want your main monster zone to have anything in it. But I guess you can still use that Brandish Maiden Rye that you summon from Air Zero to make one of your Link monsters, since Rye is a quick play effect. And finally, 1 Royal Decree. This is really just because this deck plays no traps. I think this can be, you can play something else in place of this, but Royal Decree is just like, it has like its fringe use in my opinion. It's still pretty useful. For the extra deck, since we're playing OCG main deck, we're also going to be playing OCG extra deck. So to start off is going to be 3 Brandish Maiden Kagari and 3 Shizuku. What you really want to do with this deck is, during your main phase, you want to make the Brandish Maiden Kagari first, because she's going to recycle your Brandish Maiden spells from your graveyard back to your hand to use them again. And then you can link her away and get Shizuki, because in your end phase, she's going to fetch any Brandish Maiden card, or any Brandish Maiden spell from your deck to your hand. And also, it's going to be minus 100 attack and defense for each spell in your grave for all your opponent's monsters. So that 1500 can really be difficult to deal with, especially if you have an Eagle Booster set. So your Shizuku's not even going to be affected by card effects. For the rest of the extra deck is a Borolo Dragon, Topologic Trisabana, which I mentioned before, and like what you guys saw when I showed it previously. It's pretty much a Link 3 board wipe. It's really useful. 1 Summon Sorcerer. I didn't really see this card having too much play in this deck. I kind of just wanted to try it out to see how good it would work, and it really didn't do much for this deck. I never really went into it too much. More or less, I went like Trisabana, Borreload, or Decode. Even Traffic Ghost I'd go into pretty often. As I just mentioned, yeah, there's going to be a Decode Talker. What's really cool about this card in this deck is making it and then using something like Anchor or Eagle Booster or even like Shark Cannon on it. Just so you have your opponent's monsters on your side of the field point in its link arrows. Or you can just use Eagle Booster to make it unaffected by your opponent's stuff. All these cards are like really generic. Just like as long as you don't have cards in your monster zone, you can just target any monster. It doesn't need to be a Brandish Maiden with Eagle Booster. Next is going to be a Traffic Ghost. The reason for this is it's generic. It's only 3 monsters. So you can just use 3 of your opponent's monsters that you took off of Widow Anchor and Shark Cannon, and just make a Traffic Ghost if you want. Then it's going to be a Double Bite Dragon. People were kind of like joking about this card, saying it was going to be really bad because it's like making all these Link monsters and then making Bite Dragon like defeats the purpose of Bite Dragon because you're just giving up a lot of resources. But in this deck, it's actually really good since all your monsters are Link 1s. Well, your main monsters are Link 1s. If you just steal your opponent's Link monster and then you link that away, you at least will have like a Link 2 going on. So that's actually pretty useful. And it's also unaffected by monster effects that aren't Link monsters, nor can it be destroyed by battle except with a Link monster, so it's also kind of hard to deal with. So you can usually get up to like 27 or 24, and that's a monster that's going to be hard for your opponent to really get rid of. Next is going to be Proxy Dragon. This is the same reason as Traffic Ghost. It's super generic, so you can just get rid of your opponent's monsters that you stole off of a Widow Anchor or Shark Cannon. Then to Troymare Goblin. Same thing as Proxy and Traffic Ghost, except this card gives you an extra normal summon, so that's pretty useful. And finally is a Code Talker. Once again, it's the same thing as the rest of the extra deck mostly. Just getting your opponent's monsters and turning them into a Link monster for you to use is super helpful. You're pretty much removing your opponent's monsters and you're getting your own monster off of it too. And like I mentioned before, everything works with Eagle Booster, since Eagle Booster is super generic. So once you like make your Link monster, your opponent tries to deal with it, you can still just use Eagle Booster, which is really cool, especially for Borreload Dragon, because Borreload is already a really difficult monster to deal with, and now making it unaffected and your opponent can't even destroy it by battle, it's just really insane. But yeah, that's my deck list for this deck. I think this deck has a lot of potential in the future meta, and like I mentioned before, it has been taking tops in OCG. So that's what I think about the deck. I think it's really good. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. And like I mentioned before, check out the description where you can find all the rest of the Garo Gaming media. See you guys next time.